Hi everybody, Jeremy Siskind here, the author of Jazz Piano Fundamentals. Oh, and that was right there. And the new solo standards for piano, as well as the classic playing solo jazz piano, but in its beautiful red second edition. And let me get this microphone in a better position. It's time for our end of year Ask Me Anything AMA. I've got a handful of questions here, nothing too crazy this year. Well, no numbers too crazy. Are some of the questions crazy? Stay and find out. So thanks to all who submitted questions, and let's get into it. All right, so from Tommy, I think that's how that works. From Tommy, I feel like in jazz, playing with others is important. Totally agree. And okay, it's just like a little funky and delayed. This is going great. Only the best of production quality. I've got my 5 production assistants here all working on this. I'm just joking. It's just me. Okay, I feel like in jazz, playing with others is important. How might I meet up with other instrumentalists, play, improvise, and just get better? Should I seek out jam sessions? And do they even exist anymore for an amateur like me? Solid question. I love this. This is my number one advice to the students who graduate from my classes is find other people to play with. I don't have the answer, but I have some ideas. First thing is take a couple of lessons. When you take a lesson, you are, of course, paying for that time with the teacher and their knowledge and expertise, but you're also paying or you're inviting yourself or setting up to be part of their musical community. And the good teachers, and I'm sure you'll pick a good one if there's somebody who's playing you they are usually really involved in their community, and they might even have a informal list in mind of their students at a certain level, and they might say, hey, I know this other pianist, or hey, I know this bass player who's looking to play more. So that is a way, a surefire way. Find a teacher who you really like as both a person and a player, and become part of their scene. And then start going to their gigs. Because guess what? Other students, other musicians who are interested in their style are going to go to their gigs. So that would probably be number one. Number two is I'm a big fan of the community college system, partially because I'm a full-time community college professor. And those are places where you can often become part of a combo program or a ensemble program if you play well enough. Especially if you're an amateur, it's not supposed to be professionals. It'd be kind of weird if professionals started playing in community college bands. But take an audition, meet the faculty. A lot of those sorts of places are very happy to have people from the community join in with their full-time students. And then I guess the other options would be more traditional. Jam sessions and coffee shop open mics are not my favorite place to go to meet people. Usually you just get to play one or two tunes. And sometimes, sometimes especially at jam sessions, you get thrown in with people who you don't know. Maybe they're not your favorite people to play with. Maybe they're at a very high level compared to you. Maybe they're at a very low level compared to you. So it's not my favorite setting, but it is a place where a lot of people get together to play. I don't know where you live, so I can't suggest a particular jam session. But even just going to a coffee shop open mic, you'll find people. So that would be my advice. Firstly, pay for a few lessons. It goes to a good cause, trust me. And in-person lessons, obviously, if you're trying to get in touch with the community. Go to people's gigs, check out the community college scene, and then just Google search jam sessions and open mics. But I think you're oriented in the right direction. I think there's all of these great tech companies and video libraries and YouTube channels, but that in-person interaction is crucial. All right, next question. What is your best advice for someone who feels stuck in their playing and ends up always playing the same voicings licks? I'm sure this is a question that many people have. I think this question comes from New Music Power, but I'm a little confused whether the people in the questions are above or below. So my apologies if I'm attributing your question to somebody else. I apologize. Blanket apology here. Your best advice for someone who feels stuck in their playing and ends up always playing the same voicings lick. I'm gonna just give a few short pieces of advice, and we'll see if anything sticks for you. First thing is sing. Well, I think if you're feeling stuck, often that means that you are relying on your muscle memory and your finger pattern. So if you can get away from your instrument and rely on your inner ear and your voice, and then work on, of course, translating that to your instrument, that is a really good way to get out of that muscle memory sort of pattern. A second thing, and I'm just going to put this in a one-word phrase, I don't mean it to be talking down to you, is think. By which I mean do some analysis, and as you practice, give yourself certain targets to meet. Maybe you're always going to hit the third on the downbeat. Maybe you're going to try playing in mostly quarter note triplets. Maybe you're going to include a leap of more than a fifth in each phrase. But instead of always following your instincts, kind of force yourself out of your comfort zone. Give yourself some sorts of standards to meet. Maybe relatedly, third thing is transcribe. And we'll talk about transcriptions, I think, other questions. It doesn't have to be that you write it down. I love learning to sing a solo. I think that is an incredibly effective way to transcribe. But if you're playing the same voicings or licks, try to expand the number of voicings and licks that you play, right? And then another thing that you could do, especially if you're a pianist, I love playing with just one finger. That makes relying on your muscle memory totally impossible. And it will force you to play things that are more intentional. This is an exercise that my teacher, Harold Danko, at Eastman, he said that when he was working with Lee Konitz, Lee would ask him to play with just one finger, and he was like, yeah, I always played better melodies with just one finger. So it's definitely something worth experimenting with. Another kind of fun limitation is limiting yourself to different ranges on the piano. Can you play everything just in between an octave? If I'm playing Days of Wine and Roses, I'm going to keep everything. It feels a little confined, but I'm playing different things than I would usually play. I would also check for a few things. This is more on the improvisation side rather than the voicing side. I would check to see what kind of intervals are you using. A lot of people who are always playing similar things are always playing scalar, very stepwise. I would also ask yourself, what beat are you usually starting on? A lot of people who are stuck in patterns start every phrase on the end of one or beat two, following the harmony. So if you would shake yourself out of those common habits, you might be able to find a little bit more variety. And in terms of the voicings, I made a video about this recently that I'll try to link. But I think after you've learned a bunch of stock voicings, the next thing to do is to think melodically. And instead of saying, okay, it's F major 7, I'm playing this voicing, to say, oh, it's F major 7, E flat 7, I'm going to play da 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 da. And think, how can I harmonize that? And so start with a melody, and you can even do an exercise of writing a melody and then harmonizing it with different voicings. But that's going to get you to something more organic rather than just plopping down a stock voicing. Thank you for your question. All right, I'm going to stop guessing who said these things, so I'll just blanket apologies all over. Do you have a best practice when you figure out a new move and want to become as fluent speaking with it as you are with your other improvisations? A new move, I like it. On the dance floor. I just discovered that one. So yeah, actually that is a big subject. I wasn't even intending to plug my books, but that is a huge thing that's talked about in Jazz Piano Fundamentals Book 2. I have this thing called the Correa process. And let me see if I can remember what C-O-R-E and A stand for. So I think C is to choose a concept. Okay, so figure out what that new move is. O is to practice it out of context. So in a 2-5-1, in just over a single note, over a pedal tone. So if it's a new rhythm that you really like, maybe you're learning to use 5 tuplets. Da 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 da. So I'm gonna play a 2-5-1 in C. Okay, so out of context. R is for repeat incessantly over a tune. So then you go to Days of Wine and Roses, the tune for the day, I guess, and you go. And you play the whole tune, all 5 tuplets. And then E is for to use it elegantly. So now you're not doing it every moment. You're going to try to slip it in as though nobody's going to notice. So. And then A is for ask what if questions. If it's 5 tuplets, maybe I start asking, well, what if I don't play the first one of the 5 tuplets? What does that sound like? What if I put little eighth notes in the 5 tuplets instead of all quarter notes? So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, da 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 da. I still need to work on that. But those kind of what if questions to get yourself to the next step. So C, choose. O, out of context. R, repeat excessively. E, scale back and use elegantly. A, ask what if questions. That's my move. All right, hi Jeremy. I wanted to ask, what was your piano background? How do you start? What music have you learned? What age? Thank you. I hope you have some fantastic holidays. Your English is great. I did make a whole video about this. I will try to link that one as well. But I'll give you some answers here. I started when I was about 4 years old in the Yamaha music education system, which I totally recommend if you have a Yamaha school near you and you have young kids, or you are a very young kid, sign your kids up. If you're 3 or 4 years old and watching this video, tell your parents, sign you up for Yamaha. It was such a great music education. And what music have you learned? I've learned a lot of music. I play classical and jazz music. I can fake some rock and roll. And I started composing at a very young age. So yeah, I started when I was about 3.5, 4. Not from a particular musical family, but I had an older brother who really hated the music classes, and so I think I decided that it was going to be my thing, that I loved it. So thanks for asking. I'll try to link that longer video. All right, I'm guessing this is Eric now. Eric sucks, so I think I had been messing up. Hey Jeremy, a question that always comes up with my students has to do with whether or not they can play root position voicings in their high school jazz band. I always explain to them it's best to have a healthy vocabulary of voicings and to listen. So I think this is a tough question because we get into thinking about what is possible and then what's ideal. Is it going to be a disaster if your students play the roots? No. Is it better for them to not play the roots? Yes. Okay. If they're playing the roots, and really regardless, what you really need to make sure is that they're not holding, they're not getting heavy, they're not kind of going to interrupt what's happening with the rest of the band. Because if you're holding this long thing while the bass is trying to walk a bass line, it's going to get really sloppy in that lower range. There's not a lot of room in that lower range. So regardless, I would try to probably avoid that lower range, not hold. And then in a perfect world, you're playing voicings that feature the 3rd and 7th on bottom and some color tones on top. But if all they can do is find that root position chord, hey, that's better than nothing. That's a start. So ideally, I think you listen to the greats and they're generally not playing the roots in the left hand if there's a bass walking a bass line. But have whatever they need to do to have a good experience. So that's a bit of a muddled, mealy-mouthed answer, but it's what I believe. All right, I think this is Jackson Mack now. Jackson says, my thing freaked out, sorry. He says, as a jazz arranger, do you need to move to cities for work? If so, where's the best city for work as a jazz arranger with singers, big band, studio, orchestra, small groups? Are there any skills you think current young musicians lack more than other generations? How do you afford to live as a jazz musician? What streams of income? Wow. Okay, lots of good questions. Jackson, we're gonna get you oriented. Okay, as a jazz arranger, do you need to move to cities for work? So it's a tricky question. So as an arranger, you need to have lots of contacts who want you to arrange for them, because there's not really, I don't think a lot of people are searching on Google, like, find me a jazz arranger, and you're probably not going to be the first one to come up in that search, no offense. So you've got to have a lot of contacts. You've got to make yourself very valuable one way or another. The advantage of being in a city is that that's a good place to make a lot of musician contacts, right? Like, that's where musicians generally are. That's where you'll be able to go to clubs and hear people and introduce yourself and meet people. So I think most most professional jazz arrangers are going to live in a city at one point in your life. Now, if you've already got a ton of contacts, or maybe you're like a genius at working social media, like your YouTube channel is way bigger than mine, you might not need to be in a city. So really the important thing is that you're in touch with a lot of jazz musicians. They're checking you out, and you're really good at convincing people to pay you to write arrangements for them. It's probably happening more in person, but it could happen online. In terms of the best cities, I mean, I think the best music is in New York, no question. LA is a pretty good city for an arranger because there's a lot of showbiz here. So there's a lot of Hollywood stuff, a lot of TV shows, and a lot of entertainers. And so a lot of those people kind of would like to have arrangements written for them. So there is an advantage to being in LA. There's also advantages to being in smaller jazz scenes, but New York and LA are kind of the two big ones. Skills you think current young musicians lack more than other generations? Yeah, knowing tunes. People are way too reliant on iReal Pro for transposition, for knowing tunes, and older jazz musicians are going to vibe you for not knowing a lot of tunes by memory. I think that's probably the biggest generational difference that I can think of. How do I afford to live as a jazz musician? In some ways I don't. I am a full-time college professor of jazz. So that is one of the most stable ways to earn a living. I also own a publishing company. And unfortunately, a lot of people have been wanting to buy my books these past couple of years. So that helps. And then I perform and I record. But if I had to only perform and record, and I also teach private lessons, if I had to only do that for a living, it would be way, way tougher to figure out things like insurance. So college is good. Teaching college is good. Teaching high school is good. That's such a beautiful career. Is teaching younger people how to play music, teaching them things about life. A lot of it is hard. A lot of it is not being a high-level musical artist. But boy, are you making a huge difference if you go into music education. And yeah, your question about like what streams of income are better than others. So for me, I'm a very nervous person about money. And so if I didn't have that consistency of a real job, quote unquote, for me, it's being a college professor, that would freak me out. So in that way, that stream of income is better. Insurance and retirement are also big deals. It's sad, but it seems like once a month I hear about some older jazz musician who just freelanced all their life and they were really great, but they didn't save for retirement or they couldn't save for retirement. At least if you have a teaching job, you're going to be set up for retirement. So that's some very honest talk. I hope that's okay. It's probably not what you're hoping to hear. When I was a freshman in college, I was at the Eastman School of Music, one of the best institutions in the world. We had a orientation assembly where someone came and said, musicians teach. That is how they make money. And it's not that simple, but boy, it's for a lot of people that is true. You make a little bit of income playing, but really you make the real adult money teaching. Now, I live in a very expensive place. I live in Southern California. If you live in the Midwest somewhere, maybe you don't need quite as much. So it's all very conditional, but teaching is one career that's not going to go away, I don't think. I'm wishing you lots of luck, Jackson. All right, I think this is Andrew now. Andrew Martin, 4199. Oh, I saw this question. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer it. So happy holidays. Happy holidays to you. What do you think music pedagogy in the USA was like in the early 1900s? I don't know. What harmonic exercises would professional players, composers, and orchestrators of that period have been exposed to? Boy, I'm not a historian in this way. So there certainly was not jazz pedagogy, right? Like that's the, I guess that's the big thing from my perspective. There was a lot more counterpoint being studied. I'm trying to think and give some sort of a useful answer. The older musicians, so the plus and the minus of this age of especially of like the 1930s through 1950s is that there's way fewer things out there. Way fewer out there. Like even if you wanted to go transcribe something, there's not that many options if you're living in 1935, right? If you want to go like transcribe something, there's just a few solos out there. That's an exaggeration, but like compared to today, where you can transcribe a million solos, like you're probably looking at like a Louis Armstrong or a Big Spiderback solo, like if you want to transcribe a great jazz solo. I'm exaggerating. Don't come at me. So I think that it was a lot more owning one or two records. That's again an exaggeration, but owning a small amount of records, knowing them backwards and forwards, being able to sing and play every solo. And then I think there's a lot of mentorship. You know, if you wanted to be a piano player, it's not that you necessarily, jazz piano player specifically, not necessarily that you went to school and did all these formal things, but you found the best jazz piano player in your area and you just like followed them and you did chores for them in exchange for lessons or whatever, and just tried to learn as much as you could from that one person, and then they hopefully slotted you into some of their gigs that they couldn't make, and you know, you kind of grow from there. So those are a couple of thoughts, but you'd have to talk with somebody smarter and more educated than me for a good answer to that question. All right, I think this is from Maramazone, something like that. Maramazone. Just wondering, when you transcribe, do you slow down or keep in real time? Or does it depend on what you're transcribing? Do you also prefer to write down your transcriptions? So it depends. I did a lot of transcriptions earlier in my life, and I never used a slow downer. So I'm really used to transcribing without slowing down. Now that those tools are so available and so easy, when I really have a question or can't hear something, I definitely use those tools more. I don't know if it's a good thing or not, but I try to do everything I possibly can to transcribe in real time. The question on whether I prefer to write it down, I do like to see it in front of me, but I recognize that things are deeper if I can sing them. I want to be able, like my star in the sky, like goal for transcribing is to be able to sing it accurately when I'm not even listening to the record. You know, to be able to know Miles Davis's Autumn Leaves solo, ba 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 da, bo do ba da ba da da, bo do da do, ba do do, ba do bo ba do ba ba do. I can't sing that low. Bo do 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 da da da, ba da do 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 da, ba ba do do ba do bo bo da, ba do ba ba bo bo ba do, ba da ba da do 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 da da da. Okay, I can keep going, but like the idea is that soul's not playing. I know it exactly, even without it on. That's the best way. And then after that, if you want to transcribe it and analyze it, look at what the scales are, that's all good. But I know that I know it if I really have it super well sung. All right. Next question from XXIW4WS. Is there a jazz great you don't particularly care for? Oh, this is a good way to get me canceled. Excellent. No, I'll give some answers to that question, and I'll say that there's some, I think especially like real just crazy modal stuff that I don't choose to listen to, and this is really going to get me canceled. Some of the Coltrane quartet stuff is like, especially when it gets really modal, just is not my favorite music. I think partially because I just love harmony, and a lot of it is just staying on one chord or staying on one mode for a really long time. And then some of it is just a little tonally, and tone I mean like timbrally, cutting for me, I guess is the word. So like, people love the Coltrane album, My Favorite Things. I have a hard time with that album. It's too much for me, and the harmony just is too stagnant. I don't quite enjoy being just in that flat harmony as much as I think some other people do. Let's see. I was just thinking about some people who are alive who I'm definitely not going to say. Here's another thing that's going to get me canceled, but I'll be honest. I think Cedar Walton is good, but I don't quite get why people are so interested and obsessed with him. If you have a Cedar Walton record that you love, recommend it to me. Put it in the comments. I just like haven't found the Cedar Walton record that I'm really falling in love with. So those are a couple like specific things that don't necessarily thrill me. Yeah, that's a good place. That's a good place for that. I don't choose to listen to like Ornette Coleman a lot. I respect it. Every once in a while I can get it. I'm in the mood for that, like once a year. We could say the same thing about like Cecil Taylor. I respect it as kind of amazing what he does. I'm not really often just turning on a Cecil Taylor album. All right. Do you know anything about Irish piano playing? No. Next question. Ooh, there's another good way to get me canceled, but it's an important question. I think it's from Blake Whatcott. Is a jazz studies / performance degree worth it? Oof, tough one. The real answer is it depends. It depends how much you're paying. Depends where you're going. Depends what level you're at. As I said in the previous answer, there's not really a lot of money in playing jazz. Even the people who are doing great aren't making that much money. And if they are, they're probably having to tour like an awful lot. And not everybody wants to do that. I think there's been a real movement against touring. It's getting so expensive. It's getting so complex with travel situations. So is a jazz studies performance degree worth it? So I would make sure you have a really good scholarship. I would make sure that you don't go into debt. Don't go into debt to study jazz. I would make sure, and this is there has to be a lot of privilege here. I'm not gonna lie. I'd make sure that you have a very minimal job while you're in school. I see all these students coming to school and then having to work a pretty substantial part-time or even a full-time job. And if you're going to get to the level of a really high-level professional musician, you need to put in 6 to 8 hours a day during your college years on your instrument. Doesn't all have to be practice. It could be some ensemble playing, some rehearsals, at least 6 to 8 hours a day. If you have to work 3 or 4 hours a day and then do your homework, it's going to be really, really hard to make that number happen. So, yeah, like I said, if you don't go into debt, if you can clear your schedule to work 6 to 8 hours a day, if you go to a school that's going to really push you and connect you professionally, it can be worth it. But I would not go to school thinking that you're going to become a jazz star because you're getting a degree. I wouldn't then think that being a jazz star is like an end goal, that then everything's great. A lot of jazz stars then go back and become college professors or quit and do something else. And I would make sure that your first goal is to improve and cultivate your love of the music. It's not going to get you many places that you want to go professionally. It could set you up really well. But I wouldn't highly recommend it, especially if you don't have a lot of financial support. That's my real answer. It's one of the reasons I teach at a community college is because I don't think anybody should be paying a ton of money to get a degree. This last one, I frustratingly, well, let me see. I think I can get it on my screen, maybe. Oh, no, it's right at the bottom of the page. So we're going to have to imagine reading it together. But it says, why Why is a lot of jazz just people playing their own versions of standards? Why aren't and don't people, especially the greats, make their own music? I know of some, but not a lot. Oh, good question. Okay, so why do people play standards? So when I was at I think it was the Stanford Jazz Camp, I took a class with the great legendary bass player Rufus Reed, and he said, what people want to hear is people playing a song that they know, something that they know, in a new way. And this is one of the beautiful things about jazz, is that so much of jazz is taking a song that people already know, but then putting a lot of yourself into it. And I think it's a beautiful way to meet an audience halfway, right? Audiences, even sophisticated audiences here, you can't see anything, like hearing familiar things. We all kind of, I think, gravitate towards familiarity. And then you put in this little magic trick of here's this song you've heard a few times, but I'm going to play it this different way. It's a bit of an illusion, and it's something then for the musician. So we've got something for the audience, something for the musician, this little magic trick in between. I think that's part of the beauty of jazz standards, that we're not just saying, hey, you audience, I'm such a genius. Come all the way over here. Hear this genius thing that I created. Do you recognize any of it? No. Good luck, right? There's a place and a time for that, and the people who are really geniuses, then we say like, oh, all right, now I'm gonna play that tune now because that was so good. Everybody's listening to that, right? You know, if you're writing a Wayne Shorter tune or you're writing a Joni Mitchell song, then hey, everybody's gonna want to play your song. For the vast majority of the people, your material's not strong enough, or your interpretation isn't compelling enough that everybody then hears your thing and wants to play it. So I think it's also a way to try to reach new audiences, because, you know, unfortunately, or maybe not, I don't know, like these days, search engine optimization is the thing. There's probably a bunch of people out there searching for, can I hear a solo piano version of Autumn Leaves? There's probably not that many people searching for whatever my new weird song is, right? And like, even though that's now like just hyper speed now, I think it also was the case that people might buy a record if they're like, oh yeah, Autumn Leaves, I want to hear another version of that. I like that tune. I mean, it's amazing at gigs when you ask for requests. First of all, people totally want to give you a request. Second of all, it's like usually one of the same 20 songs. You know, it's like, oh, Misty, that song means so much to me. And yeah, I guess I'm not saying it to make fun of people, but like these songs actually mean a lot to people. My grandmother who passed away, her like favorite song was All the Things You Are. And I think about All the Things You Are, and I think about like, that's like just a jazz standard that people play because other people have played it before. Sonny Rollins played it with Paul Bley, and then everybody liked that recording. And then like down the line to Brad Mehldau and Keith Jarrett, and everybody's playing All the Things You Are because that's the tune. But my grandma, like, she knows all the words and she loves that song. So these are songs, a lot of them, that people love. Of course, there's a generational shift happening, and I think a lot of jazz musicians are shifting with the generation, and they're playing more Joni Mitchell songs and Paul Simon songs and Beatles songs than they are playing Gershwin songs and Irving Berlin songs. So this is kind of a long, rambling answer. There's a lot of people who also are playing originals. Let's see, some pianists who come to mind: Brad Mehldau, Tigran Hamasyan, Gerald Clayton, Aaron Parks. I mean, that's just like Kurt Rosenwinkel is a great non-pianist to think about. There's a lot of original jazz out there if you're looking in the right places as well. So I hope that's a satisfactory answer. Those are some of the reasons that I can think of that people might gravitate towards standards, in addition to doing their own material. All right, folks, that was our little Ask Me Anything. If you have more questions, put them in the chat. I'll try to answer them in one form or another. Don't forget that the best thing that you can do to end your year is to buy a book from jeremysiskind.com. If you watch the end, ask me a question or give me one of your New Year's resolutions. Tell me what you're planning to do in the new year. Thanks for watching, everybody.